one week there is no express entry draw, and then the next week there is like a back-to-back draw, and it sort of leaves us wondering, when is it going to be my turn next, right? I'm sure that's a common situation with a lot of you out there. And then obviously there is this growing anxiety amongst the international students or postgraduate work permit holders who are currently in Canada, thinking, of course, if their work permits are going to expire next year, whether their work permits will be renewed next year or not. What's happening with that? And then, of course, in news on the Twitter, if you see so many different media releases, different posts, Mark Miller came on yesterday, and he had some announcements to make. And of course, then there are always those provincial nominee programs that are always creating more confusions than others. There are so many international students. I keep saying international student, but actually the people who are on work permits, open work permits, who are in this middle of this who are in this doldrum. Do I take the Atlantic provinces route? Do I take the Saskatchewan route? My friend is saying, come to Manitoba because it's easier there. What do I do? I mean, where is it that I can get a permanent residence pathway? So all of this, and a lot of this, actually, we're going to talk about today in today's weekly roundup on Canadian immigration. Thank you for joining in. My name is Kubeir. I'm a CICC licensed immigration consultant. I love Canadian immigration as a subject, as a field, and not because this is my business, not because it makes me money, not because I have got nothing else to do, but because it is exciting, because it's changing every single day. It's like the weather. It's like the clouds in the sky. It's always moving. It's always dynamic. There's always something to look forward to. Because I've been doing it for quite a long time, and the fact that I manage and moderate so many of our social media platforms, including Facebook groups, where the number of people that we have in different Facebook groups is now crossing 500,000. It's more than that, actually. And you get examples of live situations from people who are going through different circumstances, who are going through different situations. So you have that live example, you have that live experience of what has worked for some people, what has not worked for some people. So that's equal to doing thousands of applications versus just sort of in a real life scenario looking at what's happening with certain people. And after having seen all of that, and after having witnessed so many success stories, witnessed sometimes, not such a success story, but rather a failure of an instance. And you would think that you know so much about what's happening with immigration, and that's the day you have actually failed, because you can never ever know anything and everything about the whole subject, and there is always so much to learn. Because and the reason why I'm saying all this to you is because just yesterday, another of my very good friend, who is also an immigration consultant, her name is Claudia, she sent me a message saying that, did you know about this? And when I read through it, it is basically talking about the study visa extensions, study permit extensions. And there is a certain clause there, which I don't think I don't think most of the consultants, most of the lawyers knew, because when we sort of exchange the same message to so many consultants and lawyers, they're like, oh, what is this? And that basically talks about implied status, what you can, what you cannot do. And I'm going to talk to you about that as well, because that sort of tells you that so many times you just assume that this is what is implied, but actually it is not, and you could actually be working illegally without even realizing you're working illegally. So until now, nobody's been pulled up, but there is always a chance that can happen. All of this in today's very, very meaty weekly roundup. Let's get started with our presentation for the week. Okay. Quote of the week: every day may not be good, but there is something good in every day. How true is that, right? We always want every single day to be good, but it can never happen. That's not how the law of the universe works, right? We want every day to sort of not be the Monday. We don't want every day to be in the context of express entry a Tuesday or a Wednesday, when there is a draw happening every day. Right? It cannot happen. So every day may not be good, of course, but as long as you can figure out something good in that particular day, you won the battle for sure. So don't be a person who's waiting and hoping and expecting a good day, but rather find a way to make that day that you've got as a good. Very, very recently, I saw this reel, very interesting reel. And this was about when life hands you lemons and somebody says, you make lemonade. He says, no. When life hands you lemons, you take out the seeds, you plant them, you grow them, you sort of create a new variety of the lemons. You try to rule the whole business cycle and trying to grow more lemons. You go onto social media talking about how lemons are so important for you. You try to promote the lemons, you market the lemon, and once you have sold your rights to all these lemons that you're growing, because you now have a hybrid model of the lemon which nobody else knew about, and you have now collaborated with the doctors and with all the experts trying to sell the lemons, then after making millions and millions and millions of dollars, you lay back, then you make the lemonade and then enjoy it. So don't just treat the lemons just to make the lemonade, but you can see so much more coming out of it. I thought that was a very interesting analogy, but don't always just treat the lemons for the lemonade, but think of something else that can be done with it as well. This is the Canadian Immigration Weekly Roundup. Sorry, I'm feeling a bit philosophical this morning, so just forgive me if I go off the topic and start ranting or bantering about it. Starting with the PNP draw. October 17th, British Columbia invited more than 152 candidates in the BC PNP. I'm sure most of you already know about it. It's already been quite some time. But this is something that British Columbia does every week. They're holding draws. Just keep in mind that the requirement is for you to have a job offer. On the 24th of October, because British Columbia is such a stickler for keeping their weekly schedule, and they are actually one of the only provinces that does a very regular kind of a draw for PNPs. They're doing it every week. So again, on the 24th of October, they held 4 targeted draws, inviting candidates from skilled worker and international graduate categories. The only thing is the scores were slightly on the higher side. 101 candidates were invited with a minimum score of 90. That was for the tech occupations. And the other 3 draws, similar to the last week, with a score of 60. Now, 60 obviously is a great score, very low score. But then you had to be an early childhood educator or have a job offer in that field, or in healthcare, or in other priority occupations. Saskatchewan, now they have been quiet for a very long time. Sometimes you wonder what exactly is going down there in that neck of the woods. But on 23rd of October, they did finally conduct a draw, but it was a very disappointing one because they only invited 99 candidates. We are used to seeing much larger draws from Saskatchewan, 400, 500, 800,000 kind of a draw. This time it was only 99. And they invited in obviously 2 categories, which is OID, Occupation in Demand, and Express Entry. And only 40 invitations were issued to Occupation in Demand, 59 to Express Entry. And because it was such a small draw with only 99 invitations, the scores remained at a very high of 84. Oh, I mean, I don't even know why they conducted that draw. With 84, it basically meant that either you had to have a job offer in Saskatchewan, or you had to have a relative in Saskatchewan. Even with the relative, of course, you can go up to 84 easily. So close relative gives you 20 points, job offer gives you 30 points. And with that, if you are meeting the minimum threshold of 60 or even 50s, you would come to the score of 84. Prince Edward Islands held a draw on October the 19th. They have a published schedule of the draws that they conduct, I think usually once a month. This time they invited 102 Labour and Express Entry candidates. Now with Prince Edward Islands, please bear in mind, unless you are living in that province, unless you have a job offer from an employer in the province, and of course you do qualify under their eligibility score factor, don't expect to be invited. A lot of people, a lot of agents outside everywhere, they will try to sell you the concept, oh, hum aapki file PNP mein laga denge. So we will lodge your file in the PI. I don't even understand the word of this lodge. Why do they use this word? But actually, it's a very, very, I would say, desi term. But they'll tell you, we will lodge your file in PNP's, Prince Edward Islands, Saskatchewan, etc., etc. All they're telling you is that they will create your profile. But by creating a profile, especially in PEI, Prince Edward Island, PNP, it does not basically give you any advantage. The PEI expression of interest, as you will see, or the file that you create, is valid for 6 months. But Prince Edward Islands usually, normally, historically, have always invited people who are inside the province or who have a job offer. So please do not fall for that narrative that's being given to you. Express Entry. Now let's talk about that one. That's very interesting, right? Back-to-back 3 draws happened this week after nothing which happened last week. and of course, last week we were not really expecting a draw. So first of all, the first draw that happened on the 24th of October was a bit of a, I wouldn't say shock, but it sort of shook everybody up for sure. And this was because this was a provincial nominee program only draw. It was only a PNP draw, which basically means that if you were a person who have received 600 points through a PNP program, because you've received a nomination, it was linked to Express Entry, you received 600 points, then you were one of those 1,548 candidates who received an ITA in this draw with a minimum score of 776. I know it created a lot of, I wouldn't say it created a lot of anger kind of a thing, but it was very disappointing because a lot of people have been expecting that the scores would actually drop to 490s. If there was a regular draw, if there was a regular Express Entry draw, whereby they have been conducting draws. Last time it was about 3,000 something, and that would help people in 490s also get an ITA, because with the category-based draws and with the high Express Entry draws, even 490s is now become uncertain. So yeah, that's why it was a bit of a disappointing one. But hey, IRCC, they do what they have to do. But the very next day, on the 25th of October, they held another draw. They invited 300 candidates, like 300, and minimum score of 486. But this was for a category-based draws for French proficiency as the category. So if you have CLB7 in French, and that was part of your Express Entry score, part of your Express Entry profile, then 300 people were invited. Highest score, or rather the lowest score, was 486. So you can imagine how many French speakers are also now in Express Entry, and with 486, 300 invitations, again, didn't make sense as to why 300, why not 500, why not 1,000, why only 300? But again, they have been quite at it. They've been quite promising for it. It is quite promising for the francophones. And if you remember, if you've been watching my channel, if you've been watching these videos, I've been like almost, I would say, barking, if you don't want to. I mean, that doesn't sound very nice, but that's what I've been doing for the last more than a year, ever since these categories were announced, that francophones are going to have a significant advantage. They are going to have a huge advantage. And we've been sort of advocating that please, if you're on the fence, then you should add French as a second language. This is also for those people, people are willing to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to buy LMIAs, which, as you all know, is illegal to do. But you're willing to do that, but you're not willing to learn French. You are willing to come to Canada as an international student, and of course, again, spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and then obviously spend 1 year studying at least. Then you'll have 15 points, but you would have lost 1 year for age. So only 10 points advantage. And then you will get the Canadian work permit. And then again, you have to work for 1 year and then probably find an employer who can support you, do all of those things. So you're willing to effectively let your 2 years go away and spend thousands of dollars, but you don't want to take up French as a second language, which can be far, 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 far cheaper. You can be in your country, be with your family, learn French. Hey, if nothing else, think about it like this. If nothing else, at least you would have, learned another language, which can never be harmful, right? If nothing else, that's what you would have done. It could always give you a side hustle option. It can always give you a second career option, and another language, French, is never going to hurt you. If nothing else, you can always look for other options in France, right? So yeah, please, guys, take up French if you can. If you're still thinking, what options do I have? What can I do? How can I come to Canada? French is a great option. And also keep in mind that as much as these categories that we know about in Express Entry, that will they be there next year? Which categories will be there next year? Will this NOC code will be included or not? French will remain. And the reason why I say French will remain is because, first of all, French is the second national language of Canada. All right. So a lot of people, especially on the Facebook, I see those comments. Oh, they're biased against French and they're biased and they're giving that. Yes, of course, they're biased. And it is absolutely fine to be biased. Why do you forget that out of 90,000 invitations that have been issued, only 10,000 or approximately that much is for French. The other 80,000 are for Anglophones, right? So how is that bias? I mean, if there are only 2 official languages, why not? I mean, think about it. Why not, right? Instead of crying foul and saying, oh, they're being biased against, they're giving more benefit to the French, kind of thing. Hello, sort your same thing, right? Instead of expecting every day to be good, find the good in the day. So instead of expecting every day the draws are going to be the way you want them to be, instead make sure or ensure that you have sorted your profile, or you have added those factors to your profile which will ensure that you get an ITA. So that day is good for you instead of expecting every day to be good. So it's entirely up to you. I can go on and on and on and harp about it, but expect French to continue. As I said, it is second language, the second official language. There is a huge push politically and otherwise within the government to encourage Francophone immigration outside the Quebec region. The target is 14%, which is quite high, to be very honest. And with that, they will continue to give advantage to Francophones. Right now, we have advantage for Francophones on the federal level, which is the French proficiency category. You have advantage for Francophones in Ontario's PNP. They have a French speaker stream. You also have advantage for Francophones in the Saskatchewan PNP. You can get 10 additional points, up to 10 additional points for Francophones. And more than that, for Francophones, there is an international mobility program for French speakers, whereby if you can demonstrate that you have a CLB level 5 in French, just CLB level 5 in French, and if you can find an employer who's willing to give you a job offer, not LMIA, no LMIA, just the job offer, and is willing to pay the employer compliance fee online, hey, you can apply for a work permit, LMIA exempt work permit. Come to Canada, work for that employer for 1 year, closed work permit. And if the employer gives you the job offer after that, which says this job offer is valid for 12 months after you become PR, hey, you got 50 additional points. So not only do you have advantage of getting additional points because of French, you also have the advantage of getting an LMIA exempt work permit. And then the 50 points after 1 year, plus the Canadian work experience. Suddenly, so many options are opening up for you. French is the key, my friend. If you still haven't realized it, I don't know what else to offer you here. And then, of course, their third express entry draw, which happened on the 26th of October, they issued 3,600 invitations, and this was a category-based selection draw for the healthcare occupations. Now, in the healthcare occupations, they obviously have, I think, about 20. Let me quickly pull this up. Oh, sorry, I didn't pull this up earlier. I think about 24 or 34. Just let me quickly open this up so that we have this here. Healthcare. Yeah. Let me see if I can share this as well. We have, yeah, we can share this, of course. All right, so this is the healthcare occupations. Total of 35 NOC codes have been included. Dentists, dietitians, education counselors. Can you imagine? They are also part of the healthcare occupations. Did you know that, right? So again, general practitioners, of course, the doctors are there. The instructors of personal disabilities are there. The massage therapists, of course, clinical massage therapists are there. The nurses, technologists, I mean, the lab technologists, occupational therapists, optometrists. What else have you got? Physiotherapists, psychologists, registered nurses. We've already covered that. Specialists in surgery, of course, traditional Chinese medicine practitioners. Very surprising that they have pharmacy technical assistants and pharmacy assistant pharmacy technical assistants and pharmacy assistants. They don't have pharmacists, right? Strange, right? But hey, I'm not sure how and on what basis do they choose these categories, but there you go. As long as you have a NOC code of pharmacy technical assistants, then you would be in. Rather, as long as you have one of these 35 NOC codes, then you would become eligible under the healthcare occupation category specific draw as was conducted. Also, please bear in mind, and this is again a very common misconception, the NOC code does not have to be your primary NOC code. I know we have thought of it otherwise, but these are the things that you learn every single day. Several of our clients who received invitation under the category-based draws, and by that it was established that as long as this NOC code, which is a priority occupation NOC code, is in your work history, you've mentioned it in your work history. It doesn't have to be primary NOC code, okay? Please, as long as it is part of your work history, and you have 6 months of work experience, 6 months of continuous work experience within the last 3 years, system will pick that information up and you would receive an ITA. So that is something which you need to bear in mind. Only 6 months of work experience. And again, I know category-based draws is something which was pretty new when it happened, and we were all wondering how this would happen and how they would apply it. I never assumed 6 months was going to be the requirement. And 6 months work experience doesn't need to be in Canada. It could be anywhere, any country in the world, only 6 months of work experience. There are so many of these occupations for which you don't need license, you don't need any past experience. You could practically start working from in that occupation and you would become eligible. 6 months, that's all you need. No matter which country you are in, if you are at a scores of 470s, 480s, 490s, and if you think you can get those 6 months of work experience in trade categories, healthcare occupations, STEM categories, agriculture, then please do. Agriculture, and of course I forgot the transport categories. Then even if you can get those 6 months of work experience within the last 3 years, continuous work experience, start now, then you have a great option, great opportunity to get invited in any of these category-based draws, because in some of them the scores are ridiculously low. You go down to 350s, right? And therefore it becomes a great option. Now I know there is somebody who just commented here, what are the chances of STEM? It's really frustrating that other than STEM, every category-based draw is happening. Please shed some light. Your guesstimate is almost 90% true. No, my guesstimate is never 90% true. It is usually 30-40% true, because it's a guesstimate. I love speculating, of course, and why not? Speculating is interesting. Speculating is exciting, right? Sometimes you throw a dart on the board, it hits, sometimes it misses. So as far as STEM categories is concerned, yes, they did conduct a draw in July. Immediately after, there was a conference, IT conference, in which Sean Fraser came out and said how important the technical field or the IT tech was for Canada, and what all different things they were going to do to invite people. And he mentioned the category-based draws. And very next week, we had the first category-based draws, which was in healthcare. But after that, you had the STEM category-based draws. Only 500 people were invited. Did not make sense, because the Globe and Mail media release or media report came out and said that they were expecting between 34% of people would receive invitations under the STEM category. But then we realized when they said that 32% would receive invitations, then they meant 32% from the entire year of invitation. So this year they've already sent out more than 90,000 invitations. So total out of these 90,000 invitations, approximately 35,000 would have gone to people who are in STEM categories. Now, those 35,000 could have received ITAs based on their high scores, above 500, through the PNPs, through regular draws, or whatever the draws might be. It does not mean that the STEM category draws would be 32% of all the ITAs. That is not what they meant. They meant the total number of ITAs, 32% will go to STEM categories. Now, there is a huge favor for STEM categories, of course, already with Ontario, right? Ontario has been conducting tech draws since the last few years now. And people do get a huge advantage there. I know a lot of you are expecting STEM category draws to happen within Express Entry, and I'm sure it would happen. I just don't know when. I don't think anybody knows when the next STEM category draw will happen. Yes, there is this new school of thought which says that previously also when IRCC started conducting the category-based draws, first it was healthcare, then it was STEM, then it was French, and then the other categories happened. So based on that, maybe the next category that they would invite would be STEM category. I would certainly like to believe so, because that again makes for another speculation and makes it for very exciting anticipation. And as I said, I do absolutely anticipate that the STEM category draws will happen in the remainder of the year. We still have November and December to go. Technically, if you actually see, the next draw should happen on the 8th of November. All right. And after that, there is another draw anticipated on the 22nd of, so I'm counting Wednesdays. I'm not counting Tuesdays because I'm still stuck with the Wednesday clock. But let's say Tuesday. So 7th of November, one draw, 21st of November, another draw, 5th of December, another draw, and then 19th of December. So we can be hopeful. I'm forever hopeful. So we can be hopeful for at least 4 more round of draws before this year ends, or before they call it off. So with these 4 more draws, I certainly anticipate a tech draw for sure, a STEM category draw for sure. With that, maybe Ontario would also do a last hurrah and last goodbye to these draws and issue one there as well. So anticipation is there, just don't know when. The only problem here is, because the regular express entry draws have remained so high, 500 plus, right? That's been the main numbers over the last few draws that we have seen. Even if they were to conduct a STEM category draw today, or let's say next week or a week after, and let's say they issue 1,000 invitations or 2,000 invitations, then the scores are going to be very high. They're not going to be low. You can just imagine, right? They issued 300 invitations, and for the French category, the scores was 486. In STEM, they have, let's see, who is there in STEM? Let's choose the categories here again. In STEM, you have 24 NOC codes, okay? You have 24 NOC codes in the STEM category draws. In Ontario, you have only 10 NOC codes because they're picking up only IT NOC codes. But with IRCC, the federal, they're also picking up architects, architecture and service managers, business system specialists, civil engineers. So you have all these other NOC codes which are not there in Ontario's tech draw. Plenty of them, right? Land surveyors, landscape architects, mathematicians, all kinds of engineers. So this obviously this then tells you that there could be many more people in the express entry pool with scores which are decent and high, and that would then leave us open to what the scores would be. But so this is what I think, that if they are to issue the invitations for STEM category, let's say 2,000 to 3,000, I somehow don't see them issuing more than that, because by now they should have been pretty much running out of their quotas for the ITS to be issued. Already very high number of invitations have been issued. I was anticipating for the whole year about 85,000. They are already crossing 90,000. So that's already very high for this year. So all these ITAs that are being issued now, that you are seeing that are being issued in this draw, last draw, whatever, they're all for the quotas from 2024 PR quotas. So I'm anticipating not a very big draw, probably a 3,000-ish kind of a draw, if at all they do, sort of, because of the large number of NOC codes, and that they haven't conducted a draw in this one at all. Scores are not going to drop that much for STEM category. I would be very happy to see a 480s score if it happens for STEM category. But what the benefit of that is going to be is Ontario's tech draw. Now, what Ontario does is whenever IRCC conducts a draw, Ontario will take the last high score. So for example, healthcare occupation draw, which has happened right at 431. If Ontario is to conduct a healthcare draw today, their high score will be 430, and then the low score would be whatever, and they would issue out invitations to those people, which is very, very big advantage to people who are at the low 400s, right? Similarly, for tech draw, if Ontario is to conduct a tech draw, they'll do the same thing. If, for example, tomorrow IRCC conducts a STEM category draw and the score is 485, let's just, for the sake of just this discussion. So then Ontario will conduct a draw whenever they conduct their next tech draw, and their high point will be 484, 1 point less than the last express entry draw. And then they would issue invitations, let's say 1,000 invitations to scores as low as 470 or 469s or whatever, how many ever the number of people might be. So therefore, the advantage is spread out. So even 460s have a good advantage, right up to 500, of course. And that's how you have to look at it. But do I anticipate one? Yes, absolutely anticipate one. But just let's hope and see when it actually happens, and so we can all celebrate it. Other news, of course, there is so many other things that are happening. Canada announces new measures to strengthen international student integrity. That's a mouthful of a sentence there. But what has happened is that you all remember, right, that there was a lot of hue and early this year, there was a lot of hue and cry about 700 international students who were in Canada who were identified as having fake acceptance letters, and those were identified, and then there were deportation orders and all of that things were happening, right? So there was a lot of media attention to all of that. So what was happening is that this is something which I've realized when I came to Canada. Now, when we are in India, I'm an Indian, of course, right? So in India, for everything, they want an address proof. So you have to show your Aadhaar card, you have to show your passport, you have to show whatever your documentation would be, that they will establish that this is where you live. Then you have to get it self-attested, and you do all those. For everything, you have to provide a documentary proof of your identity, proof of your address, etc., etc. In Canada, for some reason, I wouldn't say for some reason, but they're very trusting, they're very believing. So whatever you tell them, they will actually believe you. And for example, if you go for your driving license test, they don't ask you for an address proof. You tell them, this is my address, ABCD, this street, this. They will just type it down, and that becomes your address. And then that document then becomes your address proof if you want to use it. So they don't ask you for the document. You go to the bank, they're not asking you for your address proof. They're just asking for your ID proof. They just ask you whatever your address is, they will change it, they will add it. Similarly, when IRCC was, and obviously that's the way the Canadian business operates. So when IRCC was receiving study permit applications, they never actually checked if the acceptance letters that you are providing to IRCC was actually genuine. So for example, you file a study permit application, you say, hey, I've got a letter from college ABC or university ABC. This is the proof, this is the document. And IRCC would just believe it because they were not doing any verification of these documents. And now we, when I'm saying we, I'm saying collective community, collective society. By creating these fraudulent practices and by encouraging these fraudulent practices, what we have done is, obviously, we have spoiled something which was working very well, because IRCC was very trusting. They were saying, okay, you're saying that you have this acceptance letter, you have paid the fee, we'll believe you and we'll issue your document, which goes against the understanding that we have, right? That the embassies are so strict, but this is what they were doing. And therefore, they would issue your study permit. And now then they have realized that people are misusing it, abusing it, and creating all those things. So now we have much more stricter practices of verifying and validating documentation. So starting 1st of December, there will be a much more stricter check on the acceptance letters, whereby each university, each college will have to verify to IRCC that they have actually issued the acceptance letter, which a student will provide as part of their application. That is first. Secondly, by next September intake, IRCC would have created a framework of recognized institutions, whereby these institutions, which are colleges and universities, would have proven to the government that they are taking good care of the students, they have housing issues resolved, and that they're. So if you, for example, then register with a registered institution or a recognized institution, the chances of your study permit approval will be significantly better. That is the understanding that is being given, because these institutions would have been identified as who comply with the law, who comply with the regulations. Their students have a good, decent scoring rate. They are known as ensuring that their students remain in compliance. They are taking care of their housing issues, etc., etc. All those issues. So that is one that these institutions, the recognized institutions, will be taken care of. All right. And that basically is what happened yesterday. And this was what Mark Miller announced as part of his press conference. I've got something else to show you, and I'll come to that in a bit. Now, what also happened is that you all know the Honorary Dr. Jaishankar, who is the Indian Minister of Foreign Affairs. He had very recently made an announcement after this India and Canadian political issue that though they are concerned with whatever is happening, they are certainly looking to resume the visa operations in Canada for Canadians, the Indian visa operations in Canada. And lo and behold, the very next day, I think a day later, Indian Embassy announced that they were resuming operations in Canada for people who wish to apply for Indian visas. Not all visas were resumed. So e-visas are still on hold, and the tourist visas are still on hold, but a lot of entry visas, conference visas, medical visas, business visas, those have been resumed. And I'm hoping that the other couple of visa streams that are still not resumed, those will also be opened up, and basically we can go back to normal there, at least on that front. Also, by the fact that these visa operations have been opened up or have been resumed, you would hope that there would be some sort of de-escalation of these tensions that have in the recent past have gone up, that some sort of normalcy can happen there, and we can go back to living peacefully and without any anxiety on those areas. But in addition to that, we also know that Canada has removed 41 of its diplomats from India because they were asked to do so. In view of maintaining parity between the diplomats in Canada and in India. And based on that, once they removed these diplomats, they also had to remove a lot of their staff who were operating the Canadian visa offices. So apparently there were 27 staff of Canadian staff, visa officers, who were managing the visa operations in India. Out of 27, 22 were removed, leaving only 5 overlooking and overseeing all the different visa operations. Mark Miller had come back on a media release and said that they expect nearly 20,000 applications, 17,500 to 20,000 applications would be impacted. And with this, there is going to be an issue in the understanding that that these applications will be delayed. He also indicated that the visa operations, in the sense like the visa stamping process, etc., will be delayed, may be delayed, kind of a thing, because there are only 5 staff, and these 5 staff on ground have to look at different things. The visa operation, or rather the consular operations in Mumbai, in Chandigarh, and Bengaluru, those were suspended. Only the New Delhi visa office operations continued the way you would expect. And when you're sending your passport for visa stamping to Canada, if you have received your PPR or passport request, then don't expect it to come back to you in 10 days. Expect delays. That is what is going to happen. With all of this, they are still hoping that all this will be resolved and they will come back to normalcy by early 2024, beginning of 2024. So fingers crossed for that. I hope that happens sooner than later. Now, the interesting bit. Studying in Canada, does it guarantee you a pathway to permanent residence? You know what? I have something which is a clip from yesterday's media release with Mark Miller. I'm sharing that with you. It's on a slightly higher speed because we wanted to sort of get that done sooner than later. So, let's give it a listen.
I think it's important to stress that being an international student or being a prospective international student isn't a guarantee of permanent residence or a guarantee of citizenship. Unfortunately, part of the fraud is unscrupulous agents, both in Canada and outside Canada, entertaining that false hope that if you can get into a program, you can become a Canadian citizenship. There have been, as you mentioned, I'm sure you've covered this, there are limited pathways from to permanent residency. I do recognize, and this is work that is currently ongoing, I don't have anything to announce to you today, but this is work that is going on, particularly with some of my stakeholders in the construction trades and other industries, to make sure that we are not becoming even more addicted to temporary foreign workers, with all the realities that has created in a country such as ours, depressed wages, exploitation at times. Not to say that there aren't good actors, there are, but what part of that ecosystem, I know I keep using the word, is it does have that aspect of creating some very perverse incentives. And so what I'm looking at, quite frankly, is a number of things that we could potentially announce over the next few months, including increasing the points we attribute to skilled trades, and opening more clearer paths to permanent residency for those people that are already here. And I don't have anything to announce today. There's still some work being done by my team to make sure that we refine that. But what I don't want to do is continue to entertain the atmosphere of uncertainty that a lot of people face, particularly people that have fallen out of status, and their skills are needed to be, in terms of regularizing their status, but also perhaps providing a pathway to permanent residency. So there are a few ideas that are being toyed around. Recognize the value of the statement you made, as well as the people that are looking to become permanent residents. But I will stress that it should not be a foregone conclusion that if you're an international student, and I would say not all international students want to become Canadian citizenship, that's their right. But that is sort of a line that's being used to try to attract people here and then often take their money and leave them in a very desperate situation. I guess the ultimate question, the initial question really, is whether we agree with the petition. And that's something that I think is still something we would have to revise and is a work in progress. So I can't promise you today that I will commit to that. What I have committed to is to look at the postgraduate work permit and revamp it. It hasn't been looked at in 10 years. So that's part of the work that we have announced sort of cautiously today, and that will be work that's ongoing. The discussions that I'm having with trades, with unions, with industry, are ones that really much revolve around the labor shortage and the specific trades that need to be filled in this country if we're going to be the ambitious country that we stand in front of podiums and talk about. So I think there's a ton of options on the table. Whether the solution proposed in the petition is the one that I would favor is not something I could speak about today. But
right. So you heard that. You heard it from the horse's mouth. That studying in Canada is not a guaranteed pathway to permanent residence. That is something which all of you out there need to take into consideration. Yes, studying in Canada definitely gives you an option. It gives you additional points. It gives you your open work permit. You are in Canada. You can probably be, you can avail certain PNP options very easily. For example, master's stream in Ontario, New Brunswick student connection stream. All these are distinct possibilities, but it's not a guaranteed pathway. That's number one. Number two, if you heard that carefully, if you understood that carefully, there is an ongoing petition which says that that Canada should increase the work permit validity by 5 years for people who have completed 2 years or 3 years work experience studies, and for people who have studied for 1 year, they should get 2 years. And he said that they are looking at it, but they don't necessarily agree with it, and they will come back and say whatever. So all these petitions are helpful because it sort of raises awareness, but at the same point of time, Canada will do what it needs to do in its own interest, by and large. But what this also tells you is that, first of all, that they are considering, that they are looking at the whole postgraduate work permit program, the way it is offered. It hasn't been reformed, it hasn't been revamped in the last 10 years. And at least now that they are looking at it, there could be some changes coming up in the next few months. We do not know what changes. First of all, there is no guarantee that the postgraduate work permits will be extended again in 2024. So if you are out there hoping, praying, expecting an extension of postgraduate work permit public policy that happened in 21, 22, 23, yes, you can of course be hopeful, because that's how you should be, but don't wait for that to happen. Don't go out of status. Please make sure you maintain your status, because that is something which you have to be very, very careful. Because let's say there is a public policy, right? Not necessarily they will again give you the extension to maintain your status or restore your status, number one. Number two, even if you change your status, whether you're on a closed, you go to a closed work permit by an LMIA, or you change your status to a visitor, get a visitor record, or you even leave Canada, in all these conditions, the same public policy will give you the benefit or advantage, just like it has given. At least that's what I would assume or understand. So based on that, please maintain your status. Do not go into don't go into a position where you become illegal in Canada, because that may have further complications. More importantly, if you heard him, and even if you see the setting of Mark Miller, he was standing in a trade shop or a manufacturing area, or in a place which gives you an impression, which gives you an indication that there is a further emphasis on trade categories. He mentioned construction, he mentioned trade. Now, as a postgraduate work permit holder, there is a very, very good understanding that I have, is that if you have a job that you are working in any of these categories, trade, construction, etc., there may be a possibility you might get a longer duration of work permit, or maybe get an extension. So if you're still considering what to do, what not to do, where, what, how, then maybe doing that might also be that one sliver of hope that you might have, that this could go in your favor. Not only that, of course, working in trades will also give you an opportunity to the STEM category, category-based draws and express entry, as well as through the Ontario's trade category as well. So this is something which everybody should be aware of, should be careful about, especially if you are coming to Canada on a study visa. Please do not buy into the narrative that just because you're studying in Canada, you have a definitive pathway, you have a direct pathway. That could be severely misleading. That's basically all that I have for today's presentation. Connect with us on the social media platforms. We are basically everywhere: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Threads, TikTok, if you prefer that. But yes, we are there almost everywhere. On other note, next week is even more exciting. Why? Because we should. We will actually, not should, we will for sure have another live stream on the 1st of November. Why? Because on the 1st of November, we are expecting new permanent residence quotas to be announced. That would be Mark Miller's job. And I don't expect any big changes to happen in the PR quotas. PR quotas usually, let me see if I can pull that up for you for this year so that you know what we are talking about. I don't expect much to change there. Why? Because there is this huge, where is it gone? There is this huge consensus within the Canadian market that, when I'm saying market, I mean Canadian population, that immigration levels plan should probably be reduced. This is for 2023 and 2025. This is the PR quotas that you're already aware of. For this year, it's 465,000. Actually, I'm 100% sure we have already achieved this target. We are way above this. So by the time the news reports will come at the end of the year, you will see that this number is probably closer to this number, which was the high range for this year. So we are probably at 500,000 for this year itself as a PR quota. Next year's target to 2024 is for 485,000. 2025 is for 500,000. And of course, then you will also find out the targets for 2026. As I said, I don't expect to see much changes. You might see some changes here on the provincial nominee programs at all. If that happens, you might see some changes in the refugee program. And these numbers, I expect to see some changes there, but by and large, I don't expect much changes. I think that they want to maintain the same numbers, and even if they increase, it might increase by a teeny weeny bit, maybe 2 to 3% at most. So this is something which we will talk about once we have more information on the 1st of November. So please do tune in on that day so that we can see what does Canada have in store for us for 2024. Are they going to have a separate quota for category-based draws? Are they going to sort of keep it same as federal high skilled? All of that we will sort of find out, and we will discuss on the 1st of November when the quotas have been announced. So looking forward to that one. If you're still here, of course, please hit on that like button, boop that like button, so that we can get this video out to more and more people. And if Canada is on your mind to study, to work, to immigrate, to conduct your businesses, then by all means, please do subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you wish to book an appointment to discuss your case, your situation, your background, your profile, or whatever that might be, one-on-one, then that is the link, askkubeir.com/appointment. We can book an appointment. We can talk to you individually to understand where and what you're at. Questions, tons and tons of them. And just before I get onto the questions very quickly, I obviously will not be able to answer all of them. It's not going to be, it's not happening. It won't be possible. So if I miss your question, or if I don't answer your question, then please, after the video, post your question on the comments section so I can come back to it during today, tomorrow, and then answer as many as possible. All right. First one, Tajinder Singh, the super chat says, my CRS will be 491 in January 2024 in general category. Work permit will expire in January 2025. Any hope in express entry early next year? Okay. So again, it's very difficult to say what IRCC is planning, what Mark Miller is planning, what Canada is planning in terms of the regular draws. In my opinion, this year, because we're coming to the end of the year, their ITA quotas obviously are restricted, and there has been a bit of a slowdown in the draws. And also Deputy Minister Fox, who is the IRCC Deputy Minister, in one of the CIMM parliamentary meetings had accepted that when they conducted the category-based draws, there was a system glitch. Duh, of course, we all knew. I mean, IRCC systems, how can they not have a glitch? Of course, they had a glitch. And because of that glitch, they could not conduct certain express entry regular draws. But they did make up for them, or they will continue to make up for them. So as we roll into the next year, I am assuming that at some point of time, they would go back to giving a little bit more attention to the regular express entry draws. It happened this year as well, but then obviously by that time the category-based draws had not started. But you did see that it happened in April. There was a back-to-back draws over a span of 2 weeks where they issued 21,000 invitations, right? And it is my understanding that there was this attempt, an intent to clear, these big chunks of people which had got stuck with those very high scores, 480s plus. Because they did what they did, the scores came down to 481. And the last final draw that was done with that back-to-back draws. Will that happen again? I don't know. I don't know how many invitations they will issue. I would assume once we have the quotas for next year, we will have a better understanding of how many invitations. But going by this year's 90,000 plus invitations, you can probably look forward to similar number being issued for next year, even before they have even got onto the new quotas. But with that happening, and of course, you would expect regular express entry draws to happen a bit more, regularly the way they are, and not just PNP specific kind of a draw. With that, you should see a decline over a period of time. And I would certainly say 490s or high 480s should get cleared at some point of time. Just don't know when, because it all depends on how many invitations are being issued and how many people are there in the draw. But 490s definitely should have a good chance. Of course, if you are in category based draws, then you can then look at the scores, how it happens. As far as the categories are concerned, do I expect changes? I do, but I don't know when that would happen. Last year, when Sean Fraser was the immigration minister, he did make it very clear that the categories will stay at least for this year. So he said at least for this year. That does not mean that they will change next year. It also does not mean that they will stay. So basically, we do not know next year how it happens. But I do not anticipate them to change very quickly in the next year. I think because they have faced so much of glitches with the system and the technical glitches, IT glitches, that they'll be a bit wary to making these kind of changes, these big changes so quickly. So I anticipate that at least first quarter of next year should remain the same. I don't know. Again, it's just a guess. It's just a speculation. There should be a parliamentary meeting early February next year, which would then give us more understanding that on what basis did they choose these categories, and if we can expect any more changes to the categories or how that would go forward. But in my opinion, absolutely, it's not professional advice or something, it's just an opinion. I expect or anticipate that until at least first quarter, the categories may remain the same, will remain the same, should remain the same. And that basically, again, then gives you that leeway of at least 6 months to get some work experience in if you are targeting a category. Shazeb says, got an ITA in CEC while filing my travel history. What is CO and CR? Country of origin and country of residence. Born in Saudi Arabia, Indian citizen since birth. My wife previously Indian citizen but now Canadian. Do trips between them need to be mentioned? I'm absolutely confused about your question. So your country of origin, that's what you're asking, country of origin and country of residence. You may be born in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, that doesn't matter. Where were you habitually living for a larger part of your life? Okay, that becomes your main. So you could be an Indian who was born in Saudi Arabia, but you came back to India, and India is your country because you are an Indian. So that becomes your country of origin. And from there on, if then you change that country to another country, let's say then you migrated or immigrated, or you changed, or you went as a temporary worker to Saudi Arabia, then your country of origin became India, and then your country of residence became Saudi Arabia. Now, technically, if there is not too much of travel, I would even mention the travel between country of origin and country of residence. I would mention it. But if it's a lot of travel, then you can mention one or two, or at least the first trip that you made to come to the country of residence. At least you can mention that and show that as an ongoing trip, which establishes that you're still in that new country or country of residence. And then you can always add a letter of explanation that I have not included my travel between country of residence, country of origin, because I'm not required to, because that's what the system indicates. But even if you do, then that is not a problem. The wife, you said your wife was previously Indian citizen, now a Canadian. Well, if she's a Canadian, then you don't have to mention her travels anyways. It doesn't matter because she's not part of your application. So just your trip. Obviously, if you are between a country of origin and country of residence, as I said, you technically may not have to mention it because it's not required. But I usually do, only because I would like to keep it pretty clear, and I do not want any headaches of any ADRs coming and then redoing them. So I just like to keep it simple and straightforward. Pavneet says, I worked as a bookkeeper in a fertilizer company, changed my job to farm supervisor as they have new greenhouses under the same company name, but don't have any license. Can there be any ADR, any issues if I apply under EE? Well, if your company actually is into farming or agriculture and you are working as a farm supervisor and your employer is indicating so, then I don't think there would be any issue. Now, if IRCC has a concern, they can always reach out to your employer. They can always go online, check your company's website, see what your company does. They can check the company's registry data and see what kind of NAICS code the company has, what kind of activities the business is involved in, and does it match or relate to your background that you are claiming or stating as is. But in most cases, if the company is verifiable, if the company data is verifiable, and if your company has given to you in writing that this is the job that you're performing or you were involved in, then in most cases, IRCC is pretty cool about it. And as I said, if they have a concern, if they feel that there is some naughty business going on over here, then they can always reach out to the employer. They can also ask you to provide additional documentation in support of your claim of that work experience. But yes, IRCC can always ask you for additional documents. Jyotik says, I've completed 52 weeks on a full-time job, but I had 8 weeks off in between due to medical conditions. Can I claim 1 year experience? Total working hours is 1560. Manulife settled and paid me for those 8 weeks break. As per IRCC is concerned, they say up to 2 weeks in a 1 year period is acceptable as a paid leave. They don't have a problem with that. The minute you have worked for 1560 hours over a period of time, short 8 weeks, it basically means in some weeks you have worked for more than 30 hours per week. Okay, and because you work for more than 30 hours per week in those weeks, it means those hours cannot be counted because the maximum they calculate is 30 hours per week, which basically then tells me that you are probably 8 weeks of work experience short. So give that a look and see if that is sorted out. You can obviously claim 52 weeks of full-time work. You can get an ITA. But make sure that you submit your application only after completing another 1 month of work so that you do not have any issues at a later date. Orion says, I have received a PFL and I'm not sure if they will accept my response. Can I create another EE profile and receive the ITA again, even when my application is under processing? French category. Ooh, PFLs are always very scary. Yes, so to answer your question, technically, yes, you can do that. There is no problem. You can create another express entry profile. You can get another ITA. You can even submit another application. You can technically have 2 applications in process at the same time. It's just that ideally you should withdraw one. Even if you don't withdraw one, IRCC will then reach out to you and tell you that there are 2 applications. Which one do you want to withdraw? Because they cannot proceed with both, is the way they are. But to answer your question, can you do it? Yes, you can. There is no problem. Sam says, I am on an H-1B open work permit. Does the period start from the day it's issued on the border or when we get the printed work permit, or only the date mentioned in the POE letter? Well, the date you will receive your work permit when you arrive at the border, that is when your work permit will start. That is how it usually happens, not from the day you get your POE letter. CEC got ITA. My wife is Canadian, non-accompanying, studied in India for the last 10 years. Do I put her trip in address or travel history or both? IRCC is asking for PCC. No, you do not have to indicate your wife's travel histories or address histories at all. If your wife is non-Canadian, if your wife is a Canadian and non-accompanying, you will simply provide your wife's passport copy, your marriage certificate, and that should be it. You do not need to provide any police clearance, medicals, or travel or personal history at all. Okay, where are we here? Moving on to the other questions. So let's get to this one. Mehdi says, I have received IRCC medical request, renewed passport, informed IRCC, sent new passport scan. Can I proceed with the medical test or will the process change due to the new passport number? No, you can absolutely proceed with your medical request. There is no problem. Nothing will change. When you go for your new medicals, they will just update your new passport number on your medical form. There's no problem. Navdeep says, I have submitted my PR application documents on October the 11th. I just want to know if you have an idea about current timelines nowadays getting decision based on your client's experience. Well, the standard processing time is 6 months, but we are seeing anywhere between 4 to 7 months. I mean, I'm giving a wide range, I know, but every application varies. It varies because if you have a PNP, it varies for your country of residence. It varies if there are certain complexities in your application. But I'm looking at about 4 to 7 months as an average processing for most applications at this point of time. My question is regarding the date on proof of funds certificate. I plan on submitting my application in November 2nd week. Can I get the bank certificate earlier in November 1st week and submit that? Oh yes, any date on your proof of fund letter from the bank, 30 days within the submission is absolutely fine. I've never seen that be a problem. In some cases, IRCC can always ask you for updated proof of funds, but 30 days before getting a document anywhere between 30 days before you submit your application is absolutely fine. At least I haven't seen an issue there. Do you think STEM draw will happen? I think we discussed that in detail. Had funds for years till July 22, then gave it to my mom for her apartment. She gave it back a year later in one check. Now funds are 4 months old. Last date for accepting IT a month away. What to do? explain it. Explain it just the way you have mentioned it over here. And if needed, even get an affidavit from your mother that you got this, that she received the money from you and she is returning it back. You can provide the proof of having transferred to her 1 year earlier as well. So that is also acceptable. No problem there. Visitor visa in old passport will expire in the next 6 months. Can I apply for a new visa only after current one expires, or can I apply in advance? You can apply in advance if it is expiring within 6 months, or you can travel to Canada with the existing visa and a new passport, of course, and apply for it once it has expired. Both options are available to you. How many ITAs could be expected for a STEM? I think we discussed this already. Any chances for marketeers? I don't know. There is no way to indicate which occupations are being considered as a priority for any province or for IRCC for that matter. We did this. Can I travel back to Canada on a visitor visa and postgraduate work permit if I have a COPR? The thing is, if you have a COPR, technically and ideally, you should apply for PRTD just to be on the safe side of things. But to answer your question, this is a very interesting question. Okay, and I know there is so many things that are said on platforms and Facebook forums, but I can assure you that your visitor visa does not become invalid. Your visitor visa is not cancelled. There is no problem in you traveling on your visitor visa, but I'll explain this to you how it works. So you have a COPR and you have a PR, and you've gone back to your country, and now you need to come back to Canada. You don't have your PR card, but you have a visit visa which is valid on your passport. First thing you should do is go into your GCK account and check if that visa is still valid, because if it is invalid, or if it has been revoked, or if it has been cancelled, then the system will say that this document is invalid, or this document is no longer valid. GCK will tell you that. And if the GCK says that this document is valid, then obviously you can travel. So what happens on travel is that this visa you need only for the departure country or the departure airport. Departure airport does not recognize your COPR as a travel document because they don't. They need to see a PR card or a PRTD as stamped in your passport. But if you have a visit visa and you don't mention anything about your PR status or your COPR, and you just say you have a visitor visa, at most what they do is they go into the system that they have the access to, and the airlines or the airport staff, and they will check if the visa that you have is valid or not. If the system shows it is valid, they will let you travel. Once you arrive in Canada at the border, all you need to do is it's nothing to do with your visit visa anymore. Now that you are in Canada, now you're at the Canadian border, all they're interested is in your status. Are you a permanent resident? I am a permanent resident. This is my COPR. You show your proof of identity, you show your COPR, and they will validate it online, and off you go. So to answer your question, can you travel on a visit visa even if you have a COPR? Yes, you can. And I have confirmed it myself when I was traveling very recently, I think about a month back, with the CBSA officer and the CBSA supervisor about this, because there's nowhere there is any clear information about this aspect. So I was always very interested as to know what exactly happens here. So I sat down with the CBSA supervisor and the officer, and they explained to me that once you arrive in Canada, your status matters. What visa you came onto Canada on, that does not matter. What matters is now, once you arrived in Canada, what is your status? You have a COPR, ahlan assalan. You're welcome. You're a permanent resident. Constitutionally, you cannot be stopped. How you travel from that country, where you're coming from, that's your problem. Ideally, you should have a PRTD, as I said, or a PR card, of course. And to be on the safe side and to avoid any problems in that departure country or any transit country, get a PRTD. But if you like to live on the edge, you love experiences and you love experiments, then by all means travel on a visit visa. So this is not a professional advice. I am not telling you to travel on a visit visa. I am telling you that if you do, the only issue is with the departure country, and if they accept your travel, you to travel on a visit visa or your TRV or your whatever the status, that document you might have, then arriving in Canada is not a problem. All right. I know it's a very controversial subject, but hey, that's what we're here for, right? Having a discussion. The pain is real. Sitting at 475, marketing manager, Ontario was the last hope, which is also not happening. Do you feel will be a chance now? Well, my suggestion is to take up French, improve your chances instead of waiting for things to happen. Always get it in your hand and make that happen, and that is much, much better. Got a study permit inland but no longer want to go to school. Am I in addition to school required to notify IRCC, or is it okay as long as I switch to other status? Okay, if you are in Canada on a study permit and if you choose to not study, you have 150 days to restore your status, or rather change your status. If you're not studying in Canada, you have to change your status. You have to change your status to a visitor. You cannot continue to be in Canada on a study permit and not study. The reason you were given a study permit was to study. If you're not going to study, then you change your status. If you're changing a college or institution, then you inform IRCC through your GC key about change of your college or institution. But you have to inform IRCC by either changing your status directly or by studying or by informing them of a change of DLI. Okay, we have. According to the eligible list of COQ tier code 92 can get 50 points. How can I claim it if I am for production supervisor? Is food certificate valid? So as far as IRCC is concerned, or as far as IRCC has said, that if you can obtain a certificate of qualification, even if you do not have work experience of that category listed in your work history, even then you can claim certificate of qualification. Now, as far as this food production supervisor and food certificate is valid or not, that I do not know. That you will have to go and check. I don't even know which tier code you're referring to. That is something which you will have to check yourself. In most cases, it has to be the regulatory authority of that province which issues the certificate of qualification or qualification certificate, whatever that is. It has to state on the document that you get that this is a certificate of qualification. In most cases, food related jobs or categories is regulated by the Red Seal, so you will need a Red Seal certification. And in my understanding, most of the Red Seal certification, you need work experience in that job. You should have completed a certain level of education qualifications, and you have to have certain certifications, and you need to have work experience. So please take that into consideration. Couple of my friends who studied with me in Canada from university got asked for ECA and some didn't get ECA requests. Is it because they might have put bachelors from India in education after getting ITA? Again, what you are asking me is a very vague question. Friends got asked for ECA, not got asked for ECA. I can't tell you because first of all, you have to look into their profile. You have to understand what exactly went into their profile. What did they disclose? What did they not disclose? Yes, if they have indicated their bachelor's degree in the education history, and then they have claimed 1 year of diploma in Canada, then they obviously have claimed for 2 years of 2 degrees or more for the points for education. And then they have not provided ECA, then consider them very lucky, because ECA is a mandatory document that you have to provide as part of your application. But again, your question, to be very honest, there are too many things missing here for me to give you a proper reply. You will need to understand what your friend's profile was, what was the information added, not added, what included, not included, what did they answer to the question as having an ECA, not having an ECA, and then understanding why they were asked for that information. Okay, my marriage is due in January and I have submitted my passport for stamping. Shall I do soft landing in Canada, secure the PR first and wait till after the marriage to add my spouse and then go? The decision is absolutely yours. If you choose to get married before you become a permanent resident in Canada, then you have to inform IRCC, add your spouse to your application, then both of you get another passport request, get a new get a new PR visa, then both of you can land in Canada as a PR. Versus you becoming a permanent resident first, then getting married, then you have to go back to Canada, then you have to sponsor your spouse under the spousal sponsorship. Standard processing time is 1 year. So you can then choose which way to go. They can stop postgraduate work permit for study permit holders, then they can see the result soon, how the revenue falls, not only agents, they themselves misrepresent. Okay. I received ITA in category-based draws, but now I realize I made a mistake in NOC code selection. Shall I go ahead and change the NOC? No mistakes in category-based selection NOC code. Again, I'm not sure what you're asking me. No mistakes in category-based selection NOC code. Anyways, so if your question is, after receiving an ITA, can I change my NOC code? Yes, you can change your NOC code. If you feel that there is a different NOC code which is a better match to your work experience, then by all means you can. There is no issues there. Absolutely. Currently, I have 1 year of experience and planning to move to Canada via Ontario's program. Once I complete 3 years of work experience, as I am in tech job, what should I prepare for in the few months? Please help. You don't need anything to prepare. Once you get invited, that is when the documentation checklist starts. So you can always refer to the Ontario's documentation checklist to see that you have all the required documents. There is nothing to prepare as such. If you have an active express entry profile, if your score is within the range, if your NOC code is the one that Ontario is interested in, then you would get invited. Once you get invited, you submit the application. Then you get your ITA again from IRCC after getting nomination, and then you submit your application there. So the only thing you can prepare for is to check the document requirement for both Ontario and IRCC and make sure that they are available to you, and you can prepare them in advance and have them handy. If CRS without spouse accompanying is 478 and I get an ITA in Ontario's Human Capital Priority or FSW STEM with the minimum score of cutoff 472, can I change the application to, will it change to minimum cutoff at 472? Can I change to 473? I don't understand your question. But if you're asking me, can you, if you have filed your application as spouse unaccompanying and then you can add your spouse as accompanying after getting nomination, technically you can. There is just a way to go about it. You have to inform the province. If the province agrees, you can then make the changes to your profile, add your spouse, and you can proceed. Yes, technically you can do it. It's just that sometimes IRCC may not like what you're trying to do. It can be considered as trying to circumvent the system. But can you do it? Yeah, technically, there is nothing that stops you from doing it. Can I create my express entry profile before giving IELTS? No, you cannot. You need your IELTS TRF report number, the date you gave your exam, and the date you got your results. Giving incorrect dates is not a suggested or recommended practice. Imagine that they change the categories and they still don't do one single real draw for STEM. No, I don't imagine that. I think they will conduct a draw. Okay, more questions coming through. Let's see. Studied, lived, and worked in Ontario for the past 4.5 years. Now I work remotely, Toronto, for Quebec-based company. Do I need to be worried or I have to show ties to Ontario? If so, what documents? Where do I submit docs at EAPR? If you live in Ontario, then there is nothing to be worried about showing intent, because they don't ask you where is the, they don't question your address of your employer. They question your location, where do you work, and your residence. So if you are living and residing in Ontario, regardless of the fact that you're working remotely for a company based in Quebec, it's not a problem. They don't basically ask you for it anything. I mean, they don't ask anything for it. My IELTS is expiring on 11th of November. I have uploaded my documentation today for permanent residence. So will I need to rewrite my IELTS? If yes, how much do I need to score? I got an IT at 517 CRS, but cutoff was at 504. If you got an IT, if you are submitting your PR application before the expiry of your IELTS, then you do not need to rewrite your IELTS at all. Your IELTS results or everything, your IELTS dates, everything gets locked the day you submit your application and you receive your AOR. By submitting your application, I mean when you upload all the documents, you pay the fee for your application to IRCC and you get your AOR. Once that is done, everything is locked. You don't need to worry about rewriting IELTS or expiring IELTS or new PCC or new document, unless IRCC comes back and asks you for any specific document. If there is a condition for you in the current way of things that you need to rewrite your IELTS, then you will need to again get a score which will keep your CRS score more than the cutoff, if that's what you're asking. Visit visa rejected in 2018, got study permit in 2019, and in Canada for 4.5 years. I want to know, do I answer the two statutory questions as yes or no? If you've had any kind of visa rejected, doesn't matter when, doesn't matter, you got approved after getting a refusal, you got it approved after reapplying, or whatever that might be. If you have a refusal, you say yes to that question where it asks you, have you ever been refused a visa? Say yes. and just give the date or the month or the year when your visa, what kind of visa was refused, and when it was refused, and that's it. Always stay on the safe side of things. Don't even confuse yourself. You have a refusal or rejection, doesn't matter what it was for, doesn't matter which country, doesn't matter why it happened, and you got an approval afterwards, or you applied for reconsideration, or you applied for appeal, whatever might be. You have a refusal, you mention it. It's always simple. It is always easier. It will avoid you a lot of headache and anxiety later on. Vikram, sorry, there's no question there. Chirag, will it be considered misrepresentation if I claim 15 points for a sibling who is a Canadian citizen but doesn't reside in Canada? They have property, utility bills in Canada. Well, if they don't reside in Canada, then you cannot claim points for your citizen residing in Canada. It's as simple as that. Misrep or not. If you try to manipulate the system by claiming that they're living in Canada, you very well know they're not living in Canada. So you already know that you're not eligible for those points. You know that, right? That's the reason why you're asking this question. But you still want to claim those 15 points in spite of knowing that you shouldn't be doing that. My recommendation, don't do it. Misrep or not, it's not worth it. Regardless, you can ask your sibling probably to move back to Canada for a few months until you get your PR done, and then they can move back to wherever they are. Always stay on right side of things, because 10 people may have gotten away with it. You may be the 11th one who doesn't get away with it, and you will have to pay the price for it. So don't be that 11th person ever. I am an Outland PNP applicant. My file got accepted in 30 days. Thanks. Oh, well, that's awesome. Congratulations. This is great news. 30 days is amazing. Okay. Is 0-hour contract job eligible under express entry? I honestly don't even know what 0-hour contract job means. Never heard of that concept, to be very honest. I received a notification of interest from Ontario under the tech draw. I am planning to move back to the US in the coming months. Can I get a PR through Ontario stream when I'm in US? Can I come to Canada and do the soft landing? Yes, absolutely. There is no problem. The human capital priorities stream is not employment based. It's not employment driven. It is not based on the fact of whether you're living in Canada or not. It is simply based on your past work experience and your NOC code under which you got your notification of interest. By all means, if you're moving, you can by all means, you can move. There is no issues whatsoever. Once you get approved, send your passport for visa stamping, get the passport stamped, get your PR visa done, come to Canada, do your soft landing, hard landing, whatever and however that is convenient for you. My program completes by December 1st week. I'll be going back to India for a month and be back in January. My study permit expires September. Would there be any problem during immigration? Absolutely none that I can think of, unless you create a problem. No, there is no problem. You complete your studies, you go back for a short break. There is no problem. You can still come back. You will still be back in Canada. There will be no issues whatsoever. Make sure you carry your original study permit with you. Gautam says, can I continue working after work permit expired and temporary extension date on extension application also expired? Can I apply for visitor visa in this case to have valid status and to travel outside Canada? All right. So I'm a bit confused about your question. So let me understand this. If you have applied for extension of your work permit before the expiry of your work permit, therefore you are on a valid implied status or maintained status, which allows you to continue working regardless of the date that is mentioned on the WPEXT letter, which you get in the account. So your WPEXT letter usually gives you 4 months. But that does not matter. The law states that if you are in a maintained status, you hold the same status as your previous status, as long as you applied for a new application before the expiry of that status, and you can continue being on that status until the decision has been made. So don't worry about what your work permit extension letter states or the date it states. Until your decision is made, you can absolutely continue working. All right, last question before I scoot off. FW, foreign work experience. I worked as a supervisor, but the pay stubs mentioned as trainee. Can I send a supporting document from the company by claiming 1 year points? Yes, absolutely. That's not a problem. As long as you will provide a letter from your employer, which states that you were working there. This was your job. This was your job description. This was your salary. They can mention you were working as a trainee for this period of time. That doesn't matter. Being a trainee is not a problem. you are still performing the same job. The company still gives you a letter which says that this is your work experience, this is the documentation, this is the information, this is the salary you were paid, these many hours you worked, and you can absolutely claim that work experience. Questions continue, guys. Thank you so much. Please post your questions in the comment section after the video so that I can come back and respond to as many as I can. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great weekend, and I shall see you next time. Stay forever hopeful.